Today, we're looking at a teaching story to see where things went right and where they failed to keep the reader engaged. We've already looked at the beginning, and now we're going to focus on how the middle of the story handles escalation, starting with the first obstacle the characters encounter and how or whether it creates meaningful conflict and consequences. Remember, the structure we're looking for is this one. Obstacle 1 is meaningful to the characters, but relatively easy to overcome. Obstacle 2 arises from the character's attempt to solve Obstacle 1 and only makes the situation worse. Obstacle 3, this is one which arises from some misstep in Obstacle 2 and becomes an existential threat, folding directly into the climax. This is where the characters show what they're made of, and they succeed, grow, fail, and lose everything, or die tragically attempting the impossible. This story is The Boneyard. So far, we've followed 3 engineering students, Chen, Marcus, and Ravi, on a field study at a decommissioned starship graveyard. While exploring, they discover an abandoned science vessel behaving strangely, with systems still active and a mysterious AI named Arya waiting on board. As they investigate, they uncover a shocking connection. The ship's failed experiment trapped Chen's great-grandmother in a state of temporal displacement, existing across multiple moments at once. What begins as curiosity quickly turns into a high-stakes situation. Chen believes she may be able to fix the temporal drive and save her great-grandmother, but the attempt triggers a growing anomaly that threatens not just the ship, but the entire surrounding system. So, let's start with Obstacle 1. Arya explained, when Dr. Chen Takama attempted to test the temporal drive, something went wrong. She became trapped in what she called temporal displacement. She exists at all points of her life simultaneously. For her, 14 years have passed in an instant, and not at all. She's aware of everything and nothing. Can you save her? Chen asked immediately. Possibly. If the temporal drive could be reactivated and properly controlled, we might be able to collapse her quantum state back to a single timeline. But the drive has been offline for 14 years. I do not have the expertise to restart it safely. Chen looked at the flickering figure of her great-grandmother. But I do. I've studied temporal mechanics. I can do this. Okay. Let's see. Are you sure? Asked Marcus. This is beyond our field study parameters. Now, this is where I made an editorial note. Good. We finally have some hesitation. Somebody's pushing back against what needs to be done. And that's great in a story, especially if you have multiple characters. They all shouldn't just move forward lockstep in agreement. Someone pushing back on what another character wants to do is the kind of tension you want to build into your story. So that's good. But watch what happens. Marcus doesn't really object. He doesn't create the conflict that he should. He just asks the question. And then Chen says, I have to try, said Chen. So Marcus and Ravi looked at each other and nodded. Okay, what do you need from us? And here's the problem. It almost was right on that edge of getting good, but there's no real obstacle here. Marcus raised a concern for only half a second and then immediately agreed. So the conflict I was hoping for, the hard choices I was hoping for, they're not there. There's no stakes. They're all on the same team working toward the same goal, which isn't bad in real life. But here, it doesn't help to drive the story forward. So where's the interpersonal tension? Where's the disagreement that forces Chen to choose between different values? That's a story value. Okay. For the next hour, Chen worked with Arya to understand the temporal drive systems. The math was complex, but she was good at complex math. The energy requirements were massive, but the ship still had residual power. It might work. It should work. Finally, she was ready. Arya, initiate the temporal reversal sequence. Editorial note. Note, no hesitation, no second thoughts, no moment where Chen has to choose between her great-grandmother and following proper protocols or, considering the safety of her teammates. She just does it. Initiating, said Arya. The bridge filled with a deep humming sound. The flickering intensified around Dr. Chen Takama's figure. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The multiple time states were beginning to collapse. Then something went wrong. The temporal field expanded violently outward from the command chair, engulfing the entire bridge. Suddenly, Chen, Marcus, and Ravi could see multiple versions of themselves, multiple versions of the bridge, all existing at once. I throw in another little note that the line, "then something went wrong," unnecessary. It's kind of just the author telling the reader what to expect, and the reader actually finding out what happens in a dramatic way would be better. "What's happening?" shouted Ravi. My note, "the external obstacle appears, but it's not because of Chen's choice or flaw. It's because of mysterious outside interference. She did everything right, something else went wrong." And that goes back to the idea of ideally, readers engage with a character who causes their own problems, or at least makes a misstep and worsens the problems, because that's a human thing. We all experience that. So when that happens, it really engages the reader with that character. "The temporal field is expanding," said Arya, her voice showing strain for the first time. "It's no longer contained to Dr. Chen Takama. It is spreading." "Can you stop it?" asked Marcus. I don't know. Maybe. I need to recalculate everything." "How long will it take?" asked Ravi. "Hours, maybe days. The equations are more complex than I thought." Okay, my note. This obstacle doesn't flow from her previous attempt, as I said. It's an external interference, not a consequence of her choices. Real Trifell cycle would be that her solution worked, but because she rushed it, she accidentally trapped the ship in a time loop. Now they're living the same hour over and over. Her choice should create the problem. That's the way to go. "We don't have hours," said Arya. "The temporal field is expanding at an exponential rate. In approximately 37 minutes, it will reach the nearest inhabited station. In 2 hours, it will encompass the entire star system." Let's see what we got here. Okay, the students stared at each other in horror. So that it's good that this is raising the stakes, but notice the progression. One, she's trying to save her grandmother, great-grandmother actually, which is personal stakes. Then two, something goes wrong, which is an external interference. And now everyone is in danger, which is bigger stakes. So my thought was this could work, but only, I'd rather see their choices cause the problem. As written, they're kind of victims of circumstance, not drivers of their own story. So, if it were man against nature, they're trapped in a valley and the valley is flooding and a dam breaks, which floods it even faster, whatever, all external that they have to survive, which, can work. But, it's much better if, someone makes a bad decision to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we know that they're going to suffer the consequences because that person made a bad decision. Okay. There we go. "So, if we don't fix this," started Marcus. "Millions of people will be trapped in temporal displacement," finished Arya, "just like Dr. Chen Takama, an entire civilization existing at all points in time simultaneously." Chen felt sick. She'd been trying to save one person, and instead they might doom an entire star system. And my note, this should be a powerful moment of realization, but I feel it's weakened by the fact that, Chen did everything right. She didn't make a mistake. She didn't choose poorly. An external force interfered. So she has no culpability and therefore no opportunity for growth. "What do we do?" asked Ravi, his usual optimism cracking. I should think so by this point. Chen looked at her great-grandmother, still flickering. She looked at her friends. She looked at the spreading temporal anomaly on the view screen. She took a deep breath. "We'll figure it out. We have to." Now, this is where obstacle 1 blends into obstacle 2. The idea here is to escalate the tension. Obstacle 1 should actually have been kind of easier to solve and get past, and then they make a mistake that blends into obstacle 2, but you know where we're going. For the next 20 minutes, Chen worked frantically on new equations while Marcus and Ravi monitored systems and kept her supplied with coffee from the ship's ancient but still functioning galley. Notice here who has the agency here. Chen. Marcus and Ravi have been reduced to support staff at this point, literally bringing coffee. They're not making choices or solving problems for themselves. They're not even in conflict with Chen about what to do. They're passive enablers, which again, in a story context, just kind of weakens the engagement of the story. The temporal field continued to expand. On the view screen, they could now see multiple versions of Kepler Station, some with hundreds of ships, some with none. In one version, the station seemed to be on fire. In another, it was decorated for what looked like a celebration. All versions existing simultaneously, overlapping, creating a nauseating kaleidoscope of possibilities. Not bad on the line writing, actually. Okay. See where we're at here. This is impossible, muttered Chen, scratching out another set of calculations. The interference pattern doesn't match anything in the literature. It's like something is deliberately disrupting the field. Could it be a defensive mechanism, suggested Marcus? Maybe the government installed something to prevent anyone from reactivating the drive. Chen paused. That actually makes sense. Arya, is there any kind of security protocol that might activate if someone tries to use the temporal drive? Checking, said Arya. A moment passed. Yes, I am detecting a quantum encryption lock in the drive core systems. It appears to be designed to prevent unauthorized temporal manipulation. Can you override it? Asked Ravi. No, the encryption is military grade, designed by the Temporal Warfare Prevention Coalition. Only someone with TWPC clearance could disable it. And my note? Here's another external obstacle. Something is preventing them from succeeding that has nothing to do with their choices or flaws. It's a locked door, not a moral dilemma or a consequence of their actions. So, in that way, it weakens the story. Chen slumped in her chair. Great. So we can't save my great-grandmother, and we're going to turn the entire system into a temporal disaster zone. And there's nothing we can do about it because some bureaucrat classified this decades ago. Let's see. There has to be another way, said Marcus, but his voice lacked conviction. So here, Marcus says the right words, but notice he doesn't propose any action. He's just verbally supportive. He's not creating conflict by suggesting they evacuate and let professionals handle it. He's not trying to convince Chen to give up. He's a cheerleader, not a character. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the temporal field expand. 15 minutes left before it reached the station. 15 minutes before hundreds of thousands of people joined Chen's great-grandmother in her quantum purgatory. Chen looked at the flickering figure in the command chair. Even now, caught between all moments of her life, her great-grandmother seemed to be trying to speak, to warn them, to help them, but her words came out jumbled, overlapping with other words from other times. Wait, said Chen, sitting up suddenly. Arya, can you interface with the temporal field? Can you communicate with my great-grandmother? I don't know. I have never attempted it. The field is highly unstable. But she's experienced this for 14 years. She understands the temporal drive better than anyone if we could ask her how to disable the lock. That is theoretically possible, said Arya slowly, but the process would require me to extend part of my consciousness into the temporal field. I might become trapped like Dr. Chen Takama. Another silence. Okay. My note was, this is good, presenting a choice with a cost, but notice who makes the choice and who would have to bear the cost. That's Arya, the AI, not Chen, our supposed protagonist in this story. Chen suggests the solution, but Arya has to decide whether to implement it. The protagonist is still not driving this story. And, we've just basically put the AI in a terrible spot where it has to sacrifice or decide to, put itself at risk. Do it, said Arya finally. Dr. Chen Takama sacrificed herself trying to advance human knowledge. The least I can do is risk my existence to save her. Now, of course, Chen's not making such a decision. Are you sure? Asked Chen. I am an AI. My consciousness can be backed up, restored. Dr. Chen Takama is human, irreplaceable. The choice is obvious. So, as we see here, Arya has more agency than our protagonist. Arya is making the sacrificial play. Where's Chen's choice? Where's her sacrifice? Before anyone could respond, Arya began the process. The lights on the bridge flickered as Arya redirected processing power. On the main view screen, they could see Arya's avatar, a simple geometric shape extending into the temporal field, reaching toward the flickering figure of Dr. Chen Takama. The two consciousnesses touched, and suddenly Chen heard her great-grandmother's voice, clear and coherent for the first time. Sarah, is that you? No, you're too young. My granddaughter's daughter. Chen, you're Chen. Yes, said Chen, tears streaming down her face. I'm Chen. We're trying to save you, but I know. I've seen this moment 1,000 times. Lived it. Will live it. Am living it. The encryption lock. They installed it after I got stuck to prevent anyone from replicating the accident. But there's a back door. My note was, of course there's a back door. How convenient. A back door. Can you tell us how to access it? Yes, but Dr. Chen Takama's image solidified for a moment, and then Chen saw a woman with her own eyes, her own determined expression. If you disable the lock and complete the reversal, I'll be saved, but the drive will be accessible again. Others will use it. The government will restart the temporal warfare program. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people will end up like me, trapped between moments. Chen felt her heart stop. What are you saying? You have to choose, Chen. Save me or save all those future victims. You can't do both. And finally, for me as an editor and for a reader, this is a real moral dilemma. But notice when it appears after two obstacles that were really just puzzle-solving problems and information gathering. So this choice should have been maybe the first obstacle. And notice who presents it, the great-grandmother, not Chen, discovering it through her own actions. So again, unfortunately, this leaves me with a feeling that the protagonist has been being led by the nose through this entire story. All right, now we're getting into that climax, the third obstacle folding into the most desperate part of the story. So Chen stood there, frozen. How could she choose? Her great-grandmother was right there, so close to being saved. But the cost? I can't, Chen whispered. I can't make that choice. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. It's okay, we'll figure something out together. Ravi nodded. We always do. Chen looked at her friends. Despite everything, they were smiling at her with encouragement and support. And my note, which shouldn't surprise you at this point, notice the lack of conflict. Marcus and Ravi don't disagree with Chen. They don't push her one way or the other. They're just supportive. No interpersonal tension, no competing values, no hard choices between friendship and duty. And then something remarkable happened. The temporal field began to shimmer with new colors, gold and silver and copper, like the twin suns reflecting off the hulls of ships. The light coalesced into three distinct forms that floated in the air of the bridge. What's that? Breathed Ravi. Editorial note. Here it comes, the magical external solution. The answer arrives from outside, requiring no choice or sacrifice from our characters. Arya's voice was filled with wonder. Temporal energy constructs. I've never seen anything like this. They appear to be gifts. The three glowing forms drifted toward Chen, Marcus, and Ravi. As they got closer, each took on a more specific shape. Chen's was complex mathematical equation rendered in pure light. Marcus's was a schematic for some kind of temporal shield, and Ravi's appeared to be a complete life support system design. They're from the future, said Dr. Chen Takama's voice, stronger now. From the researchers who will solve this safely. They wanted you to have these. Chen reached out and touched her gift. Knowledge flooded into her mind, not just the equations she needed, but understanding, complete, perfect understanding of temporal mechanics. So here we are. The protagonist receives a gift that solves the problem without her having to sacrifice anything or make a hard choice. Compared to the DreamForge writing guide, you can get that from the links in the description. Its emphasis on try-fail cycles where the protagonist's choices create consequences and opportunities for growth. I see it now, Chen said softly. There's a third option. We can save you and prevent the temporal warfare program. The solution was always there. We just needed to see it. Of course, said Arya. The answer is beautiful in its simplicity. So here the AI affirms the convenient solution. There's been no struggle, no growth through adversity, no transformation earned through conflict. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. That was a lot for today. But, let me know how it goes. If you feel I'm being unfair on this story, you can let me know. This is very typical of stories we see during submission periods. So it's not unusually bad or something where this author has no hope of writing a good story. These are just typical mistakes that we all make. And I'm just pointing them out from my viewpoint. And the only reason I have a viewpoint is really after reading thousands of stories and seeing what works and what doesn't work. If you've learned anything, great. If you have any questions, let me know. And next time what we'll do is we'll follow the end of this story and see how the author attempts to tie it all together and wrap it up so that we have a satisfying feeling at the end of the story. Do you think they'll make it? Let's find out next time.